fuck are we doing in Indianapolis right now? Today was the most shocking day, I think, in NFL history, as the Indianapolis Colts not only fired their head coach, because you could defend firing a head coach when your team starts as bad as the Colts did, but they hired, checks notes, Jeff Saturday, Hall of Fame offensive lineman, sure, but ultimately an ESPN analyst, as their interim head coach. Slides in a guy that a week ago was tweeting about the Raiders, not even as someone a part of a coaching staff. Jeff Saturday, whose last head coaching spot was for a high school team, not a good high school team, a high school team that went 3-7. What are the Colts doing? I can't explain it. I don't know what's going on. Someone please help me. Indianapolis Colts fans, sound off. I need to understand, because I need someone to explain this like I'm a kindergartner, because it's clear that kindergartners are running this organization at this point.
Okay, so let me take a stab at it here. As we have mentioned in previous videos, I believe the one where Sam Ehlinger was named the starting quarterback, and I got to get all my jokes off about that. The Indianapolis Colts have the 32nd ranked offense in the NFL. That is still the case after this weekend, because the Colts put up 40 passing yards, 120 total yards of offense. The Indianapolis Colts went 0 for 14 on third downs. They got sacked 9 times. And by the way, should have had 0 points, but they ended up with 3. So if you want to know who the 5 worst offenses in the NFL this season are currently, according to DVOA, Football Outsiders statistic that takes game situation into account, the worst 5 offenses in the NFL are the Colts, the Panthers, the Houston Texans, the Denver Broncos, and the Arizona Cardinals. Who are the 5 teams who are going to fire their head coach or have already fired their head coach? The Colts, Panthers, Texans, the Broncos, and the Cardinals. So if you want to know why Frank Reich got fired, it's kind of as simple as, if you have the worst offense in the NFL, regardless of circumstances, you're probably going to get fired. Frank Reich had been there for 5 years. He probably wasn't going to come back. When you have these terrible offenses, you're probably going to get fired at some point. In terms of the Jeff Saturday one, I will say this: as long as Jeff Saturday is not in consideration at all for the future head coaching positioning, if we operate under the assumption that he has no chance of getting the head coaching position for the Indianapolis Colts after this season, then it doesn't matter who the fuck you hire. You could hire anyone and it doesn't matter. You are punting on this season and it doesn't fucking matter who you hire as head coach. I think it's incredibly funny that they just went and hired like organizational guy to just be the head coach out of doing a solid to Jim Irsay. Doesn't matter. As long as you fire your coach, your season's over. This isn't baseball where Rob Thompson gets 100 games to figure out his team. This isn't hockey where Craig Berube can take over the Blues and win a Stanley Cup. No, it's football. Once you fire your coach, your season's over. Some bullshit has really had to go wrong for you to fire your coach. Everyone might point to Rich Bisaccia last year. Rich Bisaccia is the first. He's the first interim coach to ever make a playoff game in the history of the NFL. When you fire your coach, shit has hit the fan and the season's over. And as long as Jeff Saturday is not a nepotism possibility to get that job, doesn't matter who you hire, because they're just trying to get a top draft pick. And I think it's incredibly funny that they hired him.
Now, I will operate under the assumption that this interim tag is truly an interim tag and Jeff Saturday will not be the Indianapolis head coach next year. However, there is a slight possibility, a slight open door that the Colts actually respond to whatever coaching happens in that building and do make a turnaround. I do have to open the door for that possibility, not bank on it. If you told me I had all my money, all my life savings to bet on the Indianapolis Colts making a miraculous turnaround, a la the Philadelphia Phillies after firing Joe Girardi and making the playoffs, I would be a fool to take that gamble. And I think this quote really says it all. Jeff Saturday himself, why am I a candidate for this? Like, what? Okay, so you mentioned the offense. They're still trying to figure out whatever they're doing with Sam Ehlinger. And if you're going to fire Frank Reich, I guess the perfect case is I have an offensive-minded head coach whose offense sucks. You know me. I've said for the last couple of years, Brandon Staley's a defensive-minded head coach. His defense sucks. what do you do around here? What do you bring to this team? Frank Reich, if your offense is sucking, if you can't figure it out at the quarterback position and you've tried to evaluate yourself, you told Jim Irsay a couple of years ago, trade for Carson Wentz, then you do have your share, your onus and responsibility. I guess the question is, next week, are we waiting for the Chris Ballard shoe to drop? Are we waiting for the next?
No, actually, because at his press conference this evening, Jim Irsay said Chris Ballard will be the GM in 2023. Does that mean anything? Absolutely not, because he could fire him tomorrow. But
I don't know if this is true. I should clarify this. I don't know if this is true, but reportedly, Jim Irsay has fired someone every week that a game has been played since NFL Week 18, of course, the famous loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars that led to the Colts not making last year's postseason. If that is true, then that tells you Chris Ballard, he may have said that in the press conference, but is his word golden?
No, I was making a joke. Like, what is he going to do at a press conference where Chris Ballard's sitting 10 feet away from him? He's going to be like, yeah, you know what? We're going to fire this guy next. What? I mean, come on. Of course he's going to say Ballard's going to be our GM going forward. I think what this move
shows is kind of the fickleness of Jim Irsay. And Jim Irsay, for the most part, hasn't been criticized as much as other NFL owners. I feel like he kind of flies under the radar in that bubble of Indianapolis that he lives in. But is he the most meddlesome owner, or has he started to take the top spot for most meddlesome owners in the league? When you consider the quarterback swaps every single year, the last 5 years, I mentioned the stat of him paying 12 different quarterbacks, going back to Andrew Luck, $140 million, I believe. I think that's kind of tells you something about the ownership having somewhat of a hair trigger temper. And we've seen times in history, in sports history, where that's worked out for the better. We talked about like a George Steinbrenner had moments where he would just fire his head coaches on a whim and then rehire them the next day. But Jim Irsay seems to be on another level right now. If he's just saying, you're not getting it done, bye. You're not getting it done, bye. You're not getting it done, bye. We'll bring in Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz or Jimmy Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield or rotate through the next guy or get a rookie or whatever they do. And I know that the Colts coming into the year, the reasons for optimism were there. They play in a bad division. They have Jonathan Taylor, the best running back in the league. They have this offensive line. Matt Ryan, we knew that he was declining, but could he be better than last year's version of Carson Wentz? The offensive skill weapons, you get a dynamic speedster in Alec Pierce. You have Michael Pittman, the big target. The defense, Eberflus is gone, long gone. He's now in Chicago, actually turning around that team somewhat. But the defense was really the selling point, kind of still is the selling point of this team at the moment. They've been good, but not that good. They've been
hard to sell 32nd ranked offense. It's hard to sell 32nd ranked offense to anyone at this point.
Yeah, you're not exactly bringing that to your season ticket holders and saying, so we have a lot of great things going for us. We have Shaq Leonard. And I thought his name was Darius. No, it's Shaq Leonard. Anyway, we have Shaq Leonard, and our offense is quarterbacked by. Sorry, I gotta move through. Our offense is quarterbacked by Teddy Bridgewater. No. Okay.
That would be great if they did that. No, they're in blow for Bryce territory. They want to be bad so they can get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud or Will Levis or whoever the fourth guy is. At least we
will know that if they do draft a young guy, we'll see that young guy for, in theory, at least 3 years, right? We'll at least know 3 years of security at that job.
There are worse places to go for a rookie quarterback. If you're looking at who's at the top of the draft, there are worse places to go than Indianapolis at this point. Because
obviously going to be dependent on who that next head coach is too. We don't know who that would be. We talked about the Raiders, their head coaching spot in the last video we did. But I looked at the Colts and I asked myself, in terms of them being a desirable place to go, you know, if you're a head coach, you're a coaching candidate this offseason, obviously going to the Colts, you would have the opportunity to select your guy, which is a luxury that a lot of head coaches, when they end up in a spot, don't really have to do. But is that enough of a selling point? Is Jonathan Taylor enough of a selling point for a head coach to say, sign me up for Indianapolis? And yeah, I guess, you know, hey, they gave Frank Reich 5 years, right? So it's not like they're the type of ownership group that just cycles through coaches. So at least they're not like the 49ers were in the mid 2010s when they said, Tom Sula, gone. Chip Kelly, gone. On to Shanahan, right?
Yeah.
So
And
I guess they're okay in that respect.
to your point with Irsay earlier, just circling back to that, I think part of the reason that we're not quick to criticize Irsay is because Irsay is one of the few good guys that are in that ownership room. Like, if you look at some of his political donations, he's more often on the right side of history than a lot of these owners in the NFL. He's one of these people who's like preparing to like turn the team over to his daughters and have them run the team. And he's like been prepping them for years in that way. He's the guy who employed Tony Dungy and Jim Caldwell back to back. So that's part of the reason that Irsay is generally a positive on the other side of also being meddlesome. And he also was the guy who came out, was like, hey, we don't really like Dan Snyder anymore. So like, can we kind of get him out? He was like the guy on the right. He's one of the few good people
but okay,
relative
like
to
building
that,
up equity with your politics doesn't really make you a better football owner.
No, but that's part of it, is like you have so few allies in that billionaires club, and he's at least kind of an ally in that respect. I'm not giving him total credit, but he's at least relatively speaking an ally. The other side of the coin with the Colts is like, I mean, they can attract somebody. It's just about hiring the right person, and that requires interviewing 8 to 10 candidates, sitting them down, talking about it, and giving them and either Ballard or whoever the next GM is, like personnel decision making, including the possibility of trading up to get a quarterback if that's the situation they find themselves in.
I guess I just don't look at them as a splash hire destination, because I don't look at them and say Sean Payton's going to sign himself up for that job. Jim Harbaugh, another name that's going to float around there, especially because of his ties to the Colts organization. I don't see him taking that job. So now it's like, okay, we're going to take a chance on a first time around head coach, and you never know what you're going to get in that. It's the ultimate Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates, because sometimes you get Sean McVay, sometimes you get Vance Joseph. You don't know what's on the other side.
Yeah, I get that. It's just, we don't know. That's the interesting part about it. We don't know what it's going to look like, but they're going to have a chance to develop. And like you said, having Jonathan Taylor, Quentin Nelson, and Shaq Leonard, which is 3 of the best players at their position in the entire NFL. Like, if not number 1, they're number 2.
We think, because part of the problem with the Colts too is we based the expectations for this year's Colts team off of last year's Colts team, and the results were not the same. The offensive line was not the same offensive line that was advertised and sold to Matt Ryan. Jonathan Taylor, well, I do think the ability's still there. His season has been hampered by injuries, so I don't know if Jonathan Taylor is going to continue to be the back that he was in the 2021 season. Obviously, every fantasy owner in America is hoping that's not the case, but it can happen quick at the running back position, as we know.
Since we're coming up on the end of this video, there were some other funny jokes I wanted to get off here real quick about the Colts. Number 1, they personally embarrassed Matt Ryan. Like, they went out of their way to say, this guy is hurt, but we're not only going to announce this is a benching, we're also going to say he can't get his job back, despite the fact they didn't save any money by doing that. They're still guaranteeing him $40 million for the next 2 years, no matter what. Number 2, they fired Marcus Brady on Tuesday of last week and then fired Frank Reich on Monday of this week. And number 3, all of this conversation about who the interim coach is going to be helped me learn today the best and most funniest part of all of this, even funnier than Jeff Saturday being the new head coach of the Colts, which is, did y'all know John Fox is a coach on the Colts? And not just like, he's not even a coordinator. He's not even a line. He's just a dude on the coaching staff. Like, John Fox, who went to a Super Bowl 20 years ago and 10 years ago, is just a dude coaching on the Colts. Like, I just couldn't believe that when I saw that today.
Yeah, that I think is obviously too making everyone scratch their heads about the hire itself, about Jeff Saturday. It's like, you literally have Gus Bradley and John Fox, both guys who've been head coaches. John Fox at a higher level. John Fox, well, you mentioned the Super Bowl runs. At least say what you want about him.
He was a head coach 5 years ago, but I just assumed John Fox was in the Jeff Fisher purgatory of like, no one's ever going to hire him again because he's clearly like 10 years past his prime. I understood
that about John Fox, but that's another discussion. He wasn't able to turn around the Bears, but come on, since the 80s.
But he hasn't had a coaching job in 5 years. And then I found out today, oh yeah, by the way, he's just a dude on the Colts coaching staff. He's a defensive analyst. I'm just like, what? Why are you doing that job? You've been a head coach for 17 years. You've made millions and millions of dollars. Why are you doing that? For
Less
who?
stress.
For what?
Less stress, I imagine. I don't know. I don't know how to explain the Colts. I'm going to end it the same way I started this video. What the fuck? All right, guys. Well, if you know what the fuck is going on, drop that below in the comment section. We want to know your thoughts on any and all things Indianapolis. Leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all our social medias. Juju, Kyle Ledbetter, all of them. Seriously, all of our information is in the YouTube bio. Stay safe, happy, healthy. We'll see you on the next one.